I'm not going to bury the lead, though. Jon Gruden got fired. Jon Gruden got fired for emails over somewhere in the last 10 years, back when he worked at ESPN, reaching out to Bruce Allen, who was a longtime friend and colleague. And we're at this place where I don't think anyone doesn't understand, but it's like, where does it end? Right? Where is the ending place for this? Correct? Because look, what he wrote was repugnant. Okay? And it sounded like the kind of cliche high school football coach or football guy from the 90s, right? Dropping the F word for gay men, using all sorts of other language which isn't appropriate in today's culture. And honestly, like, we can sit here and go, and my line has always been, let's not look at yesterday through the lens of today. But if he was working at ESPN when I left, well, that wasn't acceptable at ESPN. It wasn't. We haven't changed that much. We haven't. But they are private emails. It was private thoughts. And you do wonder if the NFL forced this to happen because of other things. They went after the commissioner. Right? Like, where does it end? Where do we draw the line? That's the question. It's a legitimate question. It's the same question I asked in regards to this summer with Simone Biles, where she had the twisties. She couldn't perform. Okay, if a mental block were okay with her stopping her from performing in the biggest event in her sport, why wouldn't we be okay with the same thing with the male athlete? Where does it end? With this, if we're going to go back historically and find things that people have written, things that people have said, things that are repugnant, where does it end? I understand it's different when you're basically the football czar for the Raiders. And today you wake up and you feel bad for everyone else with the Raiders. Like, look, Mike Mayock had a cozy job on TV. He wasn't going anywhere. He ends up going and becoming his GM. They're going to bring in a new head coach who's going to get his own GM. It's the way it works. The idea that Mike Mayock's going to get to hire his own GM, like, nah, he worked for Jon Gruden. He's a Gruden guy. They're going to clean house this offseason. That's how sports work. They may keep him for another year. That's what happened with Reggie McKenzie, the previous GM. So I feel sympathy mostly for people who get caught up in the wake. And I just wonder where does it end? Because the point I made today on social media is, okay, if we can't employ Jon Gruden as coach of one of the historically significant and even maybe the insignificant teams in the National Football League because of those emails, where do we draw the line? The halftime show at this year's Super Bowl, which you can tell me that it's a more important job that Jon Gruden has. I would also point out that he's employed Carl Nassib, who's the only openly gay player in the National Football League, which kind of goes to the real point of it, which is like, it's one thing to say something in an email. It's another thing to actually discriminate against a black man, against a black executive, against a gay man. Like, those things obviously are immediately fireable offenses. Now we get into language and things people say in their private and what's a joke and what's not. And how do we view something that's a private conversation? They're like, this is all a reasonable conversation to have. Okay, but the halftime show doesn't necessarily represent the league. You don't work for an individual team. You don't hire and fire, but it is the signature. It's really the signature event, sponsored event of the Super Bowl. And this year specifically, I love Snoop Dogg. I love Snoop Dogg. The first time I ever heard Snoop Dogg, it was on the Deep Cover soundtrack. It's a song about murdering cops. That's what it's about. I can't make it up. It still exists. You can download it. It's a really good song. It's called Deep Cover, I believe. Right? I mean, go back to the Chronic, which is in the conversation of greatest hip hop albums of my lifetime. There's plenty of songs that in the title alone, incredibly offensive lyrics. Eminem's going to be in there. Like, come on, what are we doing? Where does it end? And are we just okay with Jon Gruden takes the fall for everything else and then we move on? There isn't necessarily a right and a wrong. I like congruent arguments. And it feels like we make different arguments for different people. And I understand that's how society works, right? I understand that to whom much is given, more is expected. But there's plenty of people who have lots that have been given to them that we don't actually have those expectations of. This is a hard question. But this is where we are. Like, look, in San Francisco, they have taken the names of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln off elementary schools because George Washington had slaves. Like, again, we're looking at yesterday through the lens of today. It's ridiculous. I think that's way past the line. Okay, but obviously there are enough people locally who don't think that's past the line. Like, that doesn't do anything. It just makes us look ridiculous, in my opinion. Buyer, where do you draw the line? Like, what are your thoughts on? Let's just start with the Gruden stuff. You thought he should have been fired for the original email, if I'm correct.
It's not necessarily what I said. I said that I thought that he could be fired.
Okay.
I thought that was an outcome that you didn't. I think at the time, just with that email, that was the case. That you didn't think was going to happen, but ultimately it led to these other emails being found and then him being dismissed.
You were a high school football in Wisconsin 20 years ago, right? That type of language. And again, I'm not saying, in no way I'm saying, well, everybody was saying it, so it must have been okay. I was a high school ball boy as a kid. Okay. That's El Medina High School. My brother and sister went. I was the ball boy. I also used to get the spit cups for a kid named Pat Finn. Okay. On the bus. That was my job. They called me Gopher. I go for everything. Right. And that's where I learned how to curse. Like, that's where I learned all of these words. I didn't know anything. And like that's how I learned it. How much of that language would you hear? Do you remember when you were playing high school football?
I mean, honestly, the F word that was used, didn't hear that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, I think that the words that we've evolved out of. There's an R word, right, that people used to use and just throw into sentences when somebody thought something was dumb. It's whether you have a child who's special needs or not, it's a repugnant word. And I was waiting for that to be in the email drop, quite frankly, because it felt like he's using all these other words that people used back in the 1980s, right? That's what it felt like.
Sure.
But you didn't hear but now what?
No. Yeah. I mean, honestly, not a lot. Of the characterization of DeMaurice Smith, obviously that was never used. The F word that he used, I think that there was a P word that was used. Yeah, that one. Sure.
That's what if you were soft, if you weren't seen as tough.
Yes.
If you didn't come to practice or go all out.
Yes.
Then you were going to call the P word.
Yes.
Okay. No. Okay. So. Where do we draw the line? Do we draw the line at Gruden and go, hey, he's a coach, he runs a franchise, players didn't want to play for him? And I think there's a good portion of this to where the league was like, we can't have this. And then I'm sure the players, based upon remember, 8 days ago, this is how fast life comes at you. 8 days ago, they walked into SoFi Stadium, 3/4 of the fans were their own. In Los Angeles, they were undefeated. They've lost their last 2 games. Their coach was fired. Their team is in complete disarray. That is in 8 days. Anyway, where do we draw the line?
Well, I think in Gruden's situation, because of where he is and the power that he holds in that organization. I mean, he was the head coach, but he's also, Mike Mayock has the GM title, but from everything that we know, that Gruden is the ultimate final say in all of that as well. So him, having that stance of that position of power and of leadership, I do find it difficult to keep him in that situation.
Okay. Do you think it's hypocritical to have the halftime show as we have it?
I think I think in the ways that those phrases are used in those songs, I don't look at Dr. Dre or Snoop Dogg as being in the similar position that Jon Gruden was in.
Okay. Yeah, no, he's not in a position of power. He does represent the league in their biggest event. That would be the only pushback, right? It's a perspective. Your perspective is one that's shared by many, and I don't know. Like, I'm not bothered by it. Like, I like it. Just, it is very, very far afield from what they've usually done with the halftime show, and it flies directly in the face of the lyrics of some, and not the songs they're going to use, but the lyrics of many of the songs with how we're trying to evolve as people. We just are. Like, look, I'll tell you, my son listens to rap almost exclusively. He does, and because things come out digitally now, more so than listening to your FM radio, every single song has explicit lyrics. It's like, it's not taboo at all. Every one. And it's like, dude, can we just find the clean version? He's like, sometimes they don't exist. I feel like that's actually getting worse, not getting better. But I could be wrong. Jay Stu, where are you on this one with Gruden and what it looks like for the rest of the league?
I said on Friday when it happened that he was going to be made an example of, and that there had not been anything like this since George Floyd and since the protests of last summer, where basically the paradigm had shifted in how corporations treat racially insensitive stuff. And I knew that he was going to receive a severe penalty. I thought the NFL was going to act, but they seem to want to keep their hands clean of this. If the report's right, they allowed certain emails to be leaked so that the pressure would be put on the Raiders to act. And I think that's it goes back to your point of, yes, there's a hypocrisy, I think, with the choice of the halftime show and the Jon Gruden situation. I think they're very dissimilar in a lot of ways, but the NFL didn't do this. This was a Raider decision, and I think that's how maybe the NFL saves a little face here. But I do agree with you. There is some hypocrisy there. But, Doug, you know that artists and singers, there is a double standard, right? We look at certain artists and their music, and they've done vile, awful things in their past, and we still enjoy their music. So, like, music is just kind of looked at in a different prism, I think. Yeah,
but sports has been that way too now. It has. I mean, it's like, I just think not to the extent of music, but sports has been that way too. Ramos, where are you on this thing?
Well, there's a lot of fine lines in a lot of this stuff, and you brought up a good point about the words used in songs and stuff like that. So, I don't know. Whatever, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where does the line start? Where does it end? What did you do 18 years ago? Is that going to come back and haunt you 5 years from now? It depends on what type of position you have. I mean, he's obviously in charge of a football team, and you have to be held to a higher standard than some other jobs are. So, I don't know. It's a fine line. I don't really have an answer for you on the exact way it should go. I just think that there's definitely a fine line in this situation.
It also is pretty remarkable. Like, Jon Gruden goes from, again, 8 days ago, Jon Gruden's got this thing going, finally got a pass rush, got his quarterback, got his stadium. It's all working, right? To, I don't see him working again. Like, he's not going to be I don't think he'll be in the NFL because he ain't going to be anybody's assistant. You can't go from running a team, an entire organization, getting fired to, he's not going to go back like as a quarterback's coach or an offensive consultant, right? But TV would have been an easy landing spot, but there's no chance now. Think about that. Like, this is not a sympathetic, it's more, damn, like that happened fast, right? That happened really, really fast. And I do think that there is a conversation to be had about the language that we've used in the past and how you learn from it. It doesn't make it okay, but it does, you should be allowed time to evolve. You just should. And I don't know, I'd be interested to know how Raider fans feel. I would say the biggest thing is that I believe he was fired because the players had to, obviously Mark Davis didn't want to represent them, but the players had to be uncomfortable with playing for him. And a lot of that is the new era of players. I honestly don't think any of the other stuff has changed. Players have always wanted more freedom, more money, more guarantees. The scale has changed. That crap hasn't changed. They've always wanted more freedom of movement, and yet they want teams to pay every dime on every contract, regardless of the wording of the contract. Like that has always happened. Right? The collective bargaining agreement has changed over the years. The money has changed, but the back and forth between players, agents, and teams, the same. Okay, that hasn't changed much. The scale has changed. Totally. But what has changed is the overall sensitivity of young players and the words used and the words they read or things they feel and how they, it's how you coach guys changes. Because how we were coached, it's really hard because kids, one, they're more aware of some words, and they also some things, and not in this particular, but some things, again, the meaning of things has changed over time. Okay? But it's a very interesting thing to how you coach them, the tone, the words you use, because the interpretation of it and the pushback of it and the outright, I ain't playing for that guy, that's changed. That's changed. So this is a fascinating topic. It really is. And when you saw the initial Gruden email, I thought there would be some sort of fine and a small suspension. And then when you heard the litany of it, here's one other point that no one else has said. You ready for it? Byron, you ready for it? I have a point no one else has said.
Okay.
Do you remember what Tom Brady got in trouble for when he won during Deflategate?
Not giving up his phone was
correct.
Yeah,
correct. And why didn't he give up his phone?
Well, because it was his phone and he didn't want everything to be available.
Correct. And the NFL today, right now, they can champion themselves and run around and go like, hey, man, we rid the world of a misogynist. We rid the world of a racist. But to anybody in the league circle, it is, I ain't giving them anything. Because this was leaked to the New York Times. This is somebody at the league office that knew what was going on that leaked it. Then they sent it to the Raiders and they leaked some more. So if you're Tom Brady, regardless of what happened with Deflategate and other, all it takes is another text message or email or something in an app on your phone that you didn't want out there. I actually totally support Tom Brady today. Don't support Jon Gruden. And I'm fascinated by where we draw the line, where it ends.